Okay, so in this lesson we're going to look at what we're going to test. So the kind of things that people test and when they first come to A/B testing are things such as homepage calls to action, the placement, size, wording, color, the kind of offer, the free today or special offer, that kind of thing, or the graphic that may accompany that call to action. They may look at the wording of microcopy. They may look at how landing pages are laid out, how headings are worded and how big they are and the color, and are they making an impact, and are people following general links. And people may experiment with images, placement, styles of those images and the content. And content itself, the actual page content, how much, what's a good style. You could look at the font sizes, the font faces and the placement of those fonts. You could experiment with different social media buttons and where they sit on the page, their size and how they may be worded and they may be titled to see if it makes a difference. And things like trade association icons as well. Things like on e-commerce sites, PayPal, Visa icons. See if having those on the page rather than not shown has an impact on people following e-commerce funnels. So these are just a few examples of the kind of things that people try and kind of things that I've experimented with and the things that you may be tempted to look at first. So that doesn't really give you a clear idea, because that's kind of a list of a lot of things. So there's a lot you could be testing, but really you need to prioritize and you need to make sure you're testing the most important things first. So you wouldn't want to start with tiny text changes. You want to start with things that are going to make the hardest hitting results first, the big wins as they're often referred to. So they may be things like layout, the layout of pages, whether something's on the left or the right, 2 columns, 3 columns, that kind of thing, or tethered to the browser. They may be media changes, so changing, like we saw on the Obama campaign, the style of images and the message behind those images, or how big they are. Could be the whole color palette might be something that's worth looking at. Are you creating, is your site overly dark? Is it overly light? Is it wishy-washy? Is it making people assume things from the color scheme? And then you can look at things like copy changes once you've got those big wins out of the way. However, going against that kind of is the idea of incremental testing. So sometimes you have to test the smaller ideas to get to the bigger picture. And really that depends how much time you've got on your hands. If you're trying to solve something and you're trying to tease out where people might be having problems, it might be useful to try these smaller changes first, because it could be that slightly different wording that's confusing people. That terminology that you think is clear, it might lead other people to make assumptions that you hadn't thought of. And again, testing people and interviewing people might help speed up that process. You may have a call to action that it could just be being lost beside something else and you couldn't see that interdependency that was going on. So trying little changes out to see if there's an effect might be really useful. Now if your site has less traffic, it's not a big site, then you probably want to try and get to those big wins faster than with that incremental approach. Drastic changes are going to help you get to your results much more quickly. It's a bit like asking somebody if they like red apples or green apples. I mean, that's not going to tell you much apart from, they like apples. But if you were trying to get to the result of which type of fruit you prefer, you're going to test apples versus oranges and oranges versus bananas. Different things, more drastic things to try and help you get to that result more quickly, because you don't have enough people, you don't have enough traffic to do a lot of tests, so you need to do the most important tests first so the whole approach doesn't take forever. So it's not just the words themselves, it's the psychology of the meaning that's important. It's the value proposition, as it's often termed. Like with the Obama campaign, it wasn't just the words; it was the whole message that the image gave of the family together with that wording of change we can believe in. It had a really powerful mental effect. So imagine this scene. We've got a couple of kittens. They need adopting. Okay, you probably don't need to do all that much work to adopt a couple of cute kittens. But you could have a couple of approaches to try out. Let me out of the cage might be one. Another might be, can I be your friend? So they're very different messages. And they've got different kind of values around them. One's a little bit more negative, and one's a kind of a plea, but it's a nice plea, and it's sort of slightly jokey. Can I be your friend? So they're kind of different, and they're going to have different results on different people. And it's kind of hard to say no to a kitten that's asking you to be your friend. So there's always a different angle to test, and you have to kind of dig out these different ideas and see which work best. So what not to test? What shouldn't you test? Well, generally speaking, small copy changes, small wording changes aren't that likely to make a great deal of difference unless they're in something vital like buttons and information architecture, so menu options. There could be a massive difference between the word stories and news, for example. So that's the kind of thing you might want to test. But changing things like the sale to this sale, it's so minor that it's unlikely to make a difference. And also things that are universally accepted as improvements, like making your email, your newsletter email, work at all widths on mobile. We kind of know that that's not going to have a negative impact. It can only be good, so you don't really need to test that. But yeah, sometimes we may be forced to test things simply to prove to people who don't understand or believe our prior knowledge that we're right. So the debate solving we've talked about already, we may have to test things like minor wording and things that are universally accepted just to show people and to solve debates. Okay, so the next lesson we're going to look at getting permission and buy-in if you work in a big organisation, how you deal with that so people understand what's happening.